Hi everyone, this is Mike, and continuing my series, we are going to take a look at H-Gen games, and we're going to start with the PS4. And the first game on this list is actually a birthday present, and I'll be starting the Xbox One portion with a similar concept, another present. But we're going to start off with the game I got recently, Bloodborne. I knew it was going to be too hard, but surprisingly enough, I actually got to play it for a little bit, and was able to play it for a while before it got too difficult. So that's yay. It feels like a survival horror game. I know it's a Dark Souls type of game, but it felt very survival horror. I was always afraid to turn every corner because if you had a crowd of people, you have too many enemies. It makes it very difficult because it's not like our Batman Arkham series where you just go destroying everyone around you. No. You have to focus on one at a time, and when you got several after you, you really got to narrow down your numbers, and you gotta if you can, and it's very difficult to pull off. So really good atmosphere. I felt this game was like scarier than Dark Souls. Dark Souls had some scary bosses, but this felt more like a survival horror experience, and that's a plus for this. Next up is The Last of Us Remastered, and basically it's an updated version of The Last of Us, and I am looking forward to the sequel. Let me check what's in here. I will say The Last of Us is worthy. The story is worthy of an Oscar, in my opinion. Next up is Injustice: Gods Among Us, the Ultimate Edition. This has all the DLC characters in it, and this version is not available on Xbox One, oddly enough. I played 2 recently, and enjoyed the story for that very much, just like I did for this one. Next up, continuing the DC thing, is Batman Arkham Knight, and the only thing I really don't like about this game is that they force you to use the Batmobile. But when they don't do that, the Batmobile is a good addition when it's optional. And the thing I really like is how a certain character is brought back that I won't mention here. You don't want to talk about it if you played it, but they bring a certain character back in an amazing way. Really unique and truly disturbing. Thumbs up. I always have to end when I talk about a game tapping it. I don't know why. Let's see what's next. Is a game that I actually completed this year, Horizon Zero Dawn, and it was too hard at first. But once they added the lower difficulty, it got easier, and I was able to play through the whole thing. Really interesting concept. I predicted what the concept was going to be, but it was interesting enough that I wanted that, and I do think it's a bit overrated. There are some issues with it, mainly with the fast travel. With the idea they went, I don't think it works. I think they just did fast travel as it typically is, but still, you gotta play this. It's a very interesting world with a very interesting idea, and now there's not much I can say about the Ula character. She's likable, but she's not, like an amazing character. And she's more of a modern day feminist icon. That was what they were going for, and but she's likable enough to where she's likable enough to play through. But I still felt like they could have developed the character a bit more. But the world and the gameplay, and this is still a really good game. I wouldn't say it's an A+, but I definitely think it's a solid B+. Definitely worth the time. Next up is Uncharted Nathan Drake Collection, and I completed every Uncharted game here. Every single one. One is my least favorite. There are some problems with it here and there, mainly with the jump. It's not quite as responsive as other games in the series, but 2 and 3 make up for that big time. And 2 and 3 take the series in a whole new. 2 took it to a whole new level. Put the series on the map, really, and honestly, I think, in my opinion, it put PlayStation 3 on the map when it came out. And 3 continues in the vein of 2, and I do enjoy all 3 games, where but I will say I liked Uncharted 1, but I loved 2 and 3. And next up, we have, no surprise here, I'm sure, Uncharted 4. And this was a nice emotional wrap-up. It doesn't raise the stakes like Uncharted 2 did, and there's not as many set pieces, but the focus this time around was on the characters and story, and I think they did a really good job of fleshing those out. Despite introducing a new character out of nowhere for the final part, it made sense to me because Nathan Drake always kept things close to the chest, and now we got to see what was in it. Next up is Mass Effect Andromeda, and this is a game that has polarized a lot of people. Unfortunately, it's hurt the series to the point where the series may not come back, at least for a while, but it had a really interesting idea. My personal experience with this was there were parts, it was a love-hate relationship. There were things I loved about this game that I adored, and I was kept playing. But there were also things that I hated as well. When this game tried to be Uncharted, it failed miserably. But when it was being itself and being a Mass Effect game, I enjoyed it very much. It's a shame that the DLC is a book, and also because there's a subplot, a mystery, involving who was really responsible for Andromeda that we never got the answer to. And that was one of those, that was the most interesting part of the story. I didn't care about the main enemies in the game. I was more interested in finding out who the benefactor was, and we never found out. Can't spoil it because there's no way to find out the truth. It's probably going to be in that book. Lame. Next up is Alien Isolation. Very intense experience. It's slow paced. It's very similar to the original movie, and if you're an Alien fan, I think this is the best Alien game you could play. I truly believe that. Next up, we have Star Wars Battlefront 1. Star Wars Battlefront from a couple years ago. Basically, it's a first-person shooter with Star Wars games. It was a Star Wars setting. And that's really all I wanted, and I was happy because of that. No campaign, but honestly, I got it for the multiplayer anyway. And plus, there's a bot mode. And there's local co-op split screen on mods. Next up is The Evil Within, and what's interesting about this game was that the parts that are typically hard for me were easy, but the parts that were typically easy for me were hard. Stealth was easy. I was able to just go around a certain area without detecting enemies just by avoiding everything. It's very, very easy to do. But when it came to the combat, I was in trouble. Total opposite of normal games for me. Next up, we have... By the way, this is a disc-based collection. I'm not... The digital games are going to be included later on in a future video. Bioshock collection. It's got Bioshock 1, 2, and Infinite. It has everything, all the single-player related stuff. It doesn't have the multiplayer, but who cares? Bioshock has always been a single-player experience for me. One I would say is my all-time favorite. I really like Infinite as well. I didn't care too much for 2 because it focused on combat too much rather than story. When Bioshock really is supposed to be about story and exploration. And that's it. But I did like Minerva's Den, despite the combat not being introduced. The story made up for that in a big way, especially its ending. But yeah, Bioshock fan. If you are a Bioshock fan, get this. Next up, we have Tomb Raider Definitive Edition. And for the first half of the game, it was super easy and fun. But halfway through, there's a point where the difficulty spikes with enemies. And the reason they spike is because they don't give you ammo and guns everywhere. Or the guns that you do get have very limited ammo in them. You run out really quick. That's never been a problem in Uncharted. And modes that were easy in Uncharted become difficult in this, unfortunately. And also, the quick time events can be unfair at times. Next up, we have Until Dawn, and this is basically a Heavy Rain-esque type game. There's some elements here that surprised me, And this game has a lot of misdirection, but eventually it does decide on a direction. And when it does, it's not quite what it was advertised to be, but it's still a game I would recommend because I like the type of game that it is, and it's for that I would recommend it for that reason. It's a choose-your-own adventure, Telltale S-type game, and that's why I recommend it really. And I have one more game left on my PS4 game collection series, and I got this all out of a red box, and I own it. The red box that I got it from allowed me to buy games. And that is Fallout 4. Unfortunately, Fallout 4 is still more difficult than the Elder Scrolls games, but it's slightly easier if you have the power armor and you can still go exploring. It's just doing certain missions and combat with enemies is still difficult, and you can still be chased off by a lot of creatures, but which makes it actually pretty scary. But at least you can explore this time around, which in Fallout 3 I wasn't able to do for very long. And that is it for my PS3 game collection. PS4. Again, why do I keep calling it PS3? I don't know. PS4 game collection series. Stay tuned. I will be doing my Xbox One video game collection in a separate video. Bye.